Angelicus Jing Jie, Spurbs.
Welcome everybody to Spurbs Herbs episode 79. Today we're going to be talking about Jing Jie, or Schizonepetae Herba, or just Schizonepeta. I, as always, I am your presenter, Dr. Greg Sperber. Today we will explore another single Chinese herb, Jing Jie, Schizonepeta Herba, or Schizonepeta. This herb is a relatively commonly used herb in the Chinese medical subcategory of warm, acrid herbs that release the exterior and can be used in colds, rashes, and even to help stop bleeding. As usual, we will explore all the intricacies of this herb as well as an explanation of its category. And as always, we will look at something a little different. Today, we are going to look at diabetes from both biomedical and Chinese medical points of view. Please stay tuned for this intriguing episode. Before we get into that, I wanted to let you guys know I've been teaching for quite a while now on a wide variety of topics. If you like this podcast and want to explore more of my courses, they are available at www.integrativemedicinecouncil.org and include a ton of different topics, including my drug herb series, looking at drugs and how they interact with herbs and vice versa, several ethics and safety courses, Chinese medical research, several treatment of condition courses such as arthritis, neck and back pain, COVID and depression and anxiety, and one of my favorite courses, the Chinese Herbal First Aid Kit. And they're all at a reasonable cost to begin with, and you get an additional 20% off with the code SH20OFF. That's SH for Spurbs Herbs, 20% off, so SH20 off, and you can get 20% off anything you order. So let's talk about diabetes a little bit, and we'll see why we're talking about it. It's such an important disease. So diabetes mellitus is a quote, heterogeneous group of multifactorial, primarily polygenic, so in other words, lots of genes, specific genes, polygenic syndromes characterized by elevated blood glucose caused by a relative or absolute deficiency in the hormone insulin. Approximately 30 million or 9.4% of the US population have diabetes, and more than a third of adults have prediabetes. It is a leading cause of amputation, adult blindness, and a major cause of nerve damage, kidney failure, and cardiovascular events such as stroke and myocardial infarct. With this in mind, let's take a closer look at diabetes from medical, chemical, and biochemical, and Chinese medical points of view. The pancreas, specifically through the beta cells of the islets of Langerhans. The islets of Langerhans are clusters of cells embedded in the endocrine portion of the pancreas, produce insulin, a peptide hormone. So there's two major types of hormones. Peptide hormones are made up of amino acids, and steroid hormones, which are made up of steroids, which are a chemical structure. These islets make up around 1 to 2% of pancreas cells. Those are the islets of Langerhans. Insulin is anabolic, meaning it builds things in the body, specifically glycogen, which is how we store glucose in certain parts of the body, and triacylglycerol, or TAG, TAG, which is how we store fats in the body, and various proteins. It is comprised of 2 amino acid chains, an A chain with 21 amino acids, and a B chain with 30 amino acids. Insulin is produced, as most proteins, by transcription of DNA into messenger RNA in the nucleus, which is translated by ribosomes in the cytosol, or the cell inside the cell, into 2 inactive polypeptide precursors, pre-proinsulin and proinsulin. These 2 precursors are cleaved in the Golgi bodies to form both the A and B chains, as well as a third C peptide, which is important for proper folding of insulin. From the Golgi, they are packaged and stored in secretory granules, which are released by exocytosis given an appropriate stimulus. So basically what happens here is you have like a little bubble, that's a secretory granule that holds a lot of the insulin. And when there's a proper stimulus, usually there's some calcium inflow or something along those lines, this little bubble or granule goes to the edge of the cell and kind of melds with the cell membrane and kind of lets the insulin out. And that process is called exocytosis. Insulin is broken down primarily in the liver and to a lesser extent in the kidneys by insulin-degrading enzymes. And this is an interesting thing. The half-life of insulin is approximately 6 minutes. We want a really short half-life. Half-life means how long does it take for half of it to be gone? And it's approximately 6 minutes. We want it to be short because basically insulin comes in when we have a big meal and we want to store all those extra nutrients. And then as soon as those nutrients are stored, we want to stop the effects of insulin. So we don't want it to have a very long half-life. So 6 minutes sounds about right for me. Insulin causes cells of the body to take in nutrients, primarily glucose, promotes their storage, and inhibits their release and mobilization. During carbohydrate metabolism in the liver and muscle, insulin increases glycogen synthesis. This is a glucose storage molecule. In muscle and adipose tissues, the number of glucose transporters are increased in the cell membrane. So these glucose transporters bring glucose into the cell. So having more of them means more glucose goes into the cell. In the liver, it also inhibits glycogenolysis, which is the breakdown of glycogen back into glucose. We don't want more glucose. We got plenty of it. So it inhibits that glycogenolysis and inhibits gluconeogenesis, which is basically forming glucose from constituents. And again, we don't want any more glucose. So we don't want any glycogenolysis or gluconeogenesis happening. And both of these decrease the production of glucose. These effects cause glucose levels in the blood to decrease, which is what we want after insulin is released. During lipid metabolism, insulin inhibits lipase, which is an enzyme that breaks down or releases that tag, so it releases fatty acids from the adipose tissues. It also increases the transport metabolism of glucose, creating glycerol 3-phosphate used for triacylglycerol tag synthesis. So it breaks down it prevents the breakdown of tag and it promotes the creation of tag. So in other words, it's sucking up the free fatty acids. Again, we just had a meal, there's free fatty acids. We want tag synthesis to happen, triacylglycerol synthesis to happen. Insulin will also affect tag in circulating chylomicrons and very low density lipoproteins, VLDL. So these are what we call the bad cholesterol. These are not good for heart health, and promotes the creation of tag from glucose in the liver. So in other words, it's really really trying to take fatty acids out of the blood. And finally, as far as protein synthesis is concerned, insulin increases the uptake of amino acids into the cells and protein translation. In other words, the production of proteins. So we're building proteins. The secretion of insulin and glucagon are coordinated and tend to be in opposite directions. When glucagon is low, insulin is high, and vice versa. They are coordinated to maintain blood glucose levels between 70 to 140 milligrams per deciliter, or 3.9, is it decadeciliter, or 3.9 to 7.8 millimoles per liter. Insulin secretion is increased by higher levels of glucose, amino acids, and gastrointestinal peptide hormones. These hormones together are called incretins and include glucagon-like peptide 1, GLP-1. If that sounds familiar, it should. This is all those hot new weight loss medications. They're GLP-1 inhibitors. These are the Wegovy and the, what's the other one that's... semaglutide or whatever, glutamate. It's all those hot injections that help you lose 20% of your weight. That's what they're affecting this GLP-1. And another hormone is gastric inhibitory polypeptide, or GIP, also known as glucose-dependent insulinotropic peptide. These are secreted in response to ingestion of food and increase the sensitivity of beta cells to glucose. Decreased secretion of insulin occurs when there is a lack of dietary intake of fuels, carbohydrates, and amino acids, and during periods of physiologic stress, such as vigorous exercise, illness, or hypoxia. This is primarily caused by norepinephrine and epinephrine, which are important in the fight or flight response of the sympathetic nervous system and promote energy formation by mobilizing glucose and fatty acids. In other words, they basically do the opposite of what insulin does. So with that as background, let's talk about, we can talk about type 1 diabetes, and I'm just going to mention that's basically, there's a lot of, we're not sure what, but there's some sort of autoimmune reaction that destroys those beta cells in the islets of Langerhans that we were talking about, and insulin stops being produced pretty much. In type 2, there's a difference. In type 2, there's a combination of insulin resistance. In other words, the cells that insulin treats don't react the same way to insulin as it did previously, and dysfunctional beta cells, so not as much insulin is actually being produced. Some is being produced, but not enough to actually be fully functional. And combine that with insulin resistance at the target cells, then you have type 2 diabetes. Polyuria or too much frequent urination and polydipsia or thirst are often presenting signs and symptoms. Since there is some insulin secretion, many of the complications of diabetes are blunted, including less ketogenesis and reduced risk of diabetic ketoacidosis. While there is a strong genetic component to its development, it is not completely understood how it develops and does not involve viruses or an autoimmune response. So what is diabetes according to Chinese medicine? So Flaz and Sinu have an excellent entry on diabetes in Chinese medicine in their book, The Treatment of Modern Western Medical Diseases with Chinese Medicine. Diabetes mellitus is traditionally characterized as xiaoke, wasting thirst or wasting and thirsting. In juvenile onset diabetes, the disease mechanism appears to be a natural endowment insufficiency, whereas in adults, this disease typically begins with long-standing heat in the stomach coupled with spleen vacuity. This heat may be due to overeating hot, spicy, greasy, fatty, thick flavored foods or alcohol, or to depressive heat of the liver and stomach, and gives rise to a large appetite and or rapid hungering after meals. The spleen vacuity may be due to overeating sugars and sweets and or fatty, thick flavored foods, too much thinking, too little exercise, and too much taxation fatigue. Spleen vacuity is responsible for obesity and fatigue initially, and also for anorexia, so lack of appetite, emaciation, loss of weight, and muscular atrophy as this disease progresses. If heat endures, it eventually damages and consumes yin fluids in the stomach and lungs, giving rise to polydipsia, that's thirst. If lung-stomach yin vacuity reaches the kidneys and is complicated by yin vacuity due to aging, lung-stomach yin vacuity may evolve into kidney yin vacuity. If spleen qi vacuity evolves into kidney yang vacuity, there may be kidney yin and yang dual vacuity. Kidney yin and or yang vacuity give rise to urinary problems as well as impotence. Because all adult diabetics also exhibit signs and symptoms of liver depression, qi stagnation, long-term qi stagnation coupled with qi and blood vacuity typically gives rise to blood stasis. In addition, spleen vacuity often also becomes complicated by damp heat, which pours downward, resulting in sores, urinary disturbances, impotence, restless leg syndrome, and or vaginitis. And that is a short introduction to diabetes. With that, let's get into today's herb. So we're going to be talking about Jing Jie Schizonepeta. This is from the family Labiatae or Laminaceae. We'll talk about why there's both of those. Standard species is Schizonepeta tenuifolia Brick, B-R-I-Q. That's the botanist who classified it. The medicinal part is the whole herb, though we're going to talk about individual parts as we go along here. Other names for this include Japanese catnip, hairy sage, Japanese mint, Nepeta multifida, Nepeta tenuifolia, Schizonepeta multifida, tenuifolia, just tenuifolia, Shuming or mousewater chestnut, Jiasu, Silengan Hao, Jing Jie, Jing Jie, and in Japanese, Keigai, Keigai. I don't know how to pronounce Japanese, or Korean, which is Hyongai, Hyonggae. Bensky and his team say so there's three major textbooks we use. We're talking about all three of them right now. So the first one is Bensky's textbook, and they say the dosage is 4.5 to 9 grams. Chen also has a book on individual herbs. It's a different book than when we talk about formulas. And they say the dose is 5 to 10 grams. So basically very similar, with a maximum dosage of 30 grams. And Brown and Wiseman, our third textbook that we usually use, say the dose is 3 to 10 grams. So they go a little bit lower than some of the others. Let's talk about that Labiatae family. It's also known, as I mentioned, as the Lamiaceae family. It includes flowering plants commonly known as the mint, dead nettle, or sage family. Generally, Lamiaceae is no N in it. Lamiaceae is considered the more correct name, though Labiatae is a correct alternative. These include many aromatic, this whole family includes many aromatic culinary and medicinal herbs, including basil, mint, rosemary, sage, savory, marjoram, oregano, hyssop, thyme, lavender, salvia, catnip, oriental motherwort, and perilla. All those. It's a very useful family. There are approximately 236 genera and up to 7,500 species, and the flowers are usually bisexual. Category is, according to Bensky, it puts this herb in the warm, acrid herbs that release the exterior subcategory under herbs that release the exterior. Chen say it is in the wind-cold releasing herbs subcategory of exterior releasing herbs, and Brown and Wiseman say it is a warm, acrid, exterior resolving medicinal under the exterior resolving medicinals category. In other words, these all say pretty much the same thing, just slightly different translations of the words, individual words. All three of our sources say it is acrid or spicy and slightly warm and enters the lung and liver channels. And by the way, all three of our sources saying the exact same thing on these is kind of a rarity. There's usually a little bit of a difference between the three books. So the fact that they all agree on this is quite an interesting piece of information. So let's talk about the history. I love it when our two major texts that mention the history of an herb disagree. Here the discrepancy seems relatively easy to resolve. Bensky and their team say this herb was first mentioned in Wu Pu's Materia Medica, or the Wu Pu Ben Cao, written during the Three Kingdoms period, which lasted from 220 to 280 CE. Chen and Chen say the original source of this herb is the Shendang Ben Cao Jing, Divine Husband's classic of the Materia Medica, written in the 2nd century CE, so before the Wu Ping's Materia Medica. The Shendang Ben Cao Jing is the oldest book that describes individual herbs that we still have today. There may have been other books, but they no longer exist. But so this is one that we still have today. So when a herb is mentioned in the Shendang Ben Cao Jing, it's basically amongst the oldest herbs we're aware of, at least written form. And since it is actually in my admittedly modern version of the Shendang Ben Cao Jing, and that it would predate the Wu Pu's Materia Medica, it seems obvious which was the first mention of this herb, which was the Shendang Ben Cao Jing. And we're going to see some quotes from that in just a minute. So before we get into that, let's talk about this category and subcategory. So we have talked about this category and subcategory of herbs several times during our adventures examining Chinese herbs, and we'll repeat that information here for completeness sake. According to Bensky, exterior releasing herbs are those that release disorders dislodged in the very superficial levels of the body. When external pathogenic factors, including wind heat, wind cold, wind dampness, and summer heat, invade the body, they first attack its superficial exterior aspects. Symptoms associated with the exterior then appear: chills, fever, headache, stiff neck, and general muscle aches. Sometimes sweating will appear, which resolves the condition, in which case no treatment is necessary. At other times, however, there will be an absence of sweating, or even though there is sweating, is not accompanied by any change in the condition. At this juncture, herbs that release the exterior are needed. Most exterior-releasing herbs are diaphoretics. That is, they release or expel the external pathogenic influences through sweating. There's a saying in Chinese medicine, when the disease is in the skin, sweating will bring it out. When a disease progresses slightly further into the body, it is said to lodge in the muscle layer. The clinical presentation then includes fever, general body aches, and profuse sweating. At this stage, especially when the patient has sweated without any beneficial change in their condition, it is appropriate to use the subset of herbs that release the muscle layer. The most prominent member of this group is Cinnamomum ramulus guai-zhi, which is cinnamon twig. Some of the herbs that release the exterior have additional functions, stopping coughs and wheezing, controlling pain or spasms, and preventing rashes such as measles. We're going to see that our herb today does some of those. So that's the category of herbs that release the exterior. Let's get into the subcategory of warm acrid herbs that release the exterior, where our herb resides. So they continue, Bensky and his team continue to discuss the subcategory of warm acrid herbs that release the exterior. Herbs that release the exterior can be further divided by character and function into warm, acrid, and cool acrid classes. The warm acrid herbs dispel wind cold and are used for exterior disorders when the fever is mild, the chills severe, and there are other signs and symptoms of wind cold, including headache, body and neck pains, and absence of thirst. So that's the categories that our herb today is in, Jing Jie is in. Let's talk about good quality Jing Jie. So Bensky and his team say good quality consists of light green, long and dense spikes with a strong aromatic fragrance. I have this other textbook that I love called The Chinese Medicinal Identification, an illustrated approach by Zhao and Chen. It says Jing Jie generally have a square rod shape with branching at the upper portion. Externally, pale yellowish green or pale purplish red with a light brittle texture and an aromatic odor. Superior quality of Jing Jie has a pale yellowish green color, long and dense flower spikes, and a potent aroma. What does this herb do? So according to Bensky, Jing Jie releases the exterior and dispels wind for exterior patterns of either wind cold or wind heat, depending on the herbs with which it is combined. Also for carbuncles or boils when they first erupt, especially when accompanied by chills and fever. It vents rashes and alleviates itching for the initial stage of measles and pruritic skin eruptions. Pruritic means itchy skin eruptions. Finally, it stops bleeding as an auxiliary herb for hemorrhage, for example, blood in the stool or uterine bleeding. Chen and Chen say it releases the exterior and dispels wind. It can be used for both wind cold and wind heat and is rather mild in action. It is acrid, yet not damaging to the yin. It is warm, but not drying. It also dispels wind and releases muscle spasms, used to treat postpartum spasms, trismus, and muscle cramps and spasms. Trismus is a spasm of the jaw muscles causing the mouth to remain tightly closed, such as in tetanus. Additionally, it dispels wind, vents rashes, and alleviates itching. And finally, it stops bleeding from various causes. Brandon Wiseman say it dispels wind and resolves the exterior, outthrusts papules and relieves itching. Papules are basically raised sores, raised rashes. So outthrusts papules and relieves itching, disperses sores, and stanches bleeding. And the Divine Farmers Materia Medica, that's that Shenang Bensao Jing that this originally was found, says this is a middle class herb. So the Divine Farmers Materia Medica It kind of breaks down herbs into superior, middle, and inferior class herbs. Superior class should be taken regularly to lighten and to help health and the body. Middle class herbs should be taken readily when there's a disease process. And inferior herbs should only be used when necessary, to combat a disease for a short period of time. So Divine Farmers Materia Medica says this middle class herb is acrid and warm. It mainly treats cold and heat, mouth fistulas, scrofulas, and sores. It breaks bound and gathered qi, precipitates blood stasis, and eliminates damp impediments. So, quite a bit different than what we would use it for modern, which we often see with the Shenan Bencao Jing. And finally, Chinese medicinal identification illustrated approach usually has one sentence or two on the actions of the herb. And they say, Zhao and Chen say, it resolves the exterior, disperses wind, and vents rashes. So there are several preparations, and Bensky, as usual, has a good discussion of those. First preparation is Schizonepeta spikes, or Jing Jie sui, or Schizonepeta spica would be the Latin for that. Spikes are much more aromatic and potent in effect than the entire aerial parts, which include both stalks and spikes. That's our normal herb. Ancient formulas specifically called for the spikes in order to disperse wind from the head and face. For example, the formula Schizonepeta and Sapashnikovia powder to overcome pathogenic influences, Jingfeng Baidusan, combines Schizonepeta spikes with other wind-dispersing herbs to treat chills, fever, and aching of the head and body. Likewise, the Grand Materia Medica, or the Bencao Gongmu, written in 1590, notes that the spikes can be taken alone as a powder with wine to treat all disorders of the head and eyes, dry blood consumption, pathogenic wind, headache, vertigo, and dizziness. Another form of this is dry fried Schizonepeta, or Chao Jing Jie. Brief frying over a medium flame will moderate the exterior releasing action of Schizonepeta, which is preferred in those patients who are already sweating and who may otherwise still need to use this herb. And further, we have charred Schizonepeta, called Jing Jie Tan, also called Hei Jing Jie, basically means black Jing Jie, Jing Jie Sui Tan, and Jie Sui Tan. Frying the herb over a hot flame or baking at 210 degrees Celsius until it turns black, but without destroying its normal shape, will encourage the herb to enter the blood level and exercise its ability to regulate the blood and stop bleeding. In rectification of the meaning of Materia Medica, the Bencao Zhang, written in 1624, Zhang Shanlei notes that this herb, fried black, has already lost its light, ascending, spreading, and dispersing qualities. Because blackness can enter the blood, it can stop the chaotic movement of blood. Chen Chen says Jing Sui, or floss Schizonepeta, the flower, treats wind invasion affecting the head. By comparison, Jing Jie, Herba Schizonepeta, the aerial part of the plant, treats wind invasion throughout the body. Brandon Wiseman adds, it should not be decocted for long. Use raw to effuse the exterior and outthrust papules and to disperse sores. Use stir-fried or char-fried to stanch bleeding. So they add in char-fried, Bensky said char-fried is good for stopping bleeding. They add in stir-fried is also good for stopping bleeding. That's what Brandon Wiseman do. So what does this herb do in Western terms? The PDR for herbal medicines does not have an entry for this herb. WebMD says it is used for common cold, fever, sore throat, pain, eczema, atopic dermatitis, psoriasis, many other conditions, but there's no good scientific evidence to support these uses. WebMD, I think, properly is a little conservative in what they say is appropriate uses. I mean, is the science, good science or not, behind these, so not surprising. As usual, Bensky has an excellent commentary on this herb, Bensky and his team. Schizonepeta herba Jing Jie is quite harmonious in nature, acrid but not overly dispersing, slightly warm but not drying. Its light ascending qualities which enter the liver and lungs allow it to be used for both wind heat and wind cold, and also for venting wind from the blood. This latter action is so marked, the treasury of words on the Materia Medica, Ben Sao Hui Yan, written in the Ming Dynasty, which lasted from 1368 to 1644, lauds it as the herb for wind in the midst of the blood. Each and every wind toxin condition, just at the threshold of manifesting, but not completely, about to disperse but not dispersing, can be cleared up with the use of unprepared Jing Jie. Seeking accuracy in the Materia Medica, Ben Sao Chu Zhen, written in 1773, explains its interactions with Sapashnikova Radix Fang Feng. Jing Jie, it says, is not like Sapashnikova Radix or Fang Feng, whose qi is not light and lifting, and which must enter the flesh and bones to drive out the wind. Thus, in order to dissipate and disperse the wind pathogen, when one uses Sapashnikova Radix Fang Feng, it is necessary to also use Jing Jie. This is because Jing Jie can enter the muscles and skin to dissipate and disperse, and thus complement Sapashnikova Radix's Fang Feng deeper action. Furthermore, since Jing Jie also enters the liver channel, the wind and wood organ, and the liver is the realm of blood storage, Jing Jie is also able to unblock and facilitate the blood vessels to treat such symptoms as nosebleed, intestinal wind, irregular menstrual bleeding, puerperal fainting, toxic swollen sores, and blood heat. Resolution of all of these symptoms relies on its light lifting as a tool for dissipating and draining. How could one regulate the qi in the organ of wind and wood, but not treat the blood as well? Therefore, while Jing Jie enters the qi aspect of the liver, it also enters its blood aspect. And that's it, basically, on commentary for this herb. But we do have some comparisons. Bensky compares it with one other herb, and that's Perilla folium or Zisuye. Now, even if you're not a Chinese herbalist, you're probably familiar with Folium perilla or Perilla folium. This is the green leaf that is in, if you do high-end sushi, they will give you a green leaf. That's Perilla folium. But one of its functions is to help with seafood poisoning. So that's why it's used a lot with sushi. But even if you haven't seen the leaf itself, you've probably gotten those sushis from the supermarket where it has like the green little fence that they give you a little bit. That is supposed to be a representation of Perilla folium, is that little green plastic stuff they will put in with the sushi. So that's Perilla folium or Zisuye. So compared with Jing Jie, both are exterior releasing and sweat inducing herbs. But while Perilla folium Zisuye disperses wind cold, Jing Jie is both stronger at dispelling wind and can also be used for either wind cold or wind heat. Perilla folium's Zisuye other actions make it the herb of choice for treating wind cold when there are middle burner issues, qi stagnation, or pregnancy. Jing Jie also acts to disperse wind heat from the blood and relieve spasms. Let's talk about some combinations. Bensky and his team combines the herb with 3 others. First one is Angelica sinensis radix or Dongui. Angelica sinensis radix Dongui harmonizes the blood by tonifying and moving it. Jing Jie expels wind from the blood. In its charred form, it regulates blood flow and stops bleeding. Treasury of Words on the Materia Medica notes, for any pattern of bleeding, if it tends to stop and start, seeming to flow but not properly, then charred Jing Jie can be used to stop it. When used together, each of these herbs complements the other such that the blood is nourished and regulated, wind is expelled from the blood, and the bleeding is stopped. This is appropriate and very effective for conditions such as intestinal wind with bleeding from the rectum. One ancient emergency formula listed in fine formulas for women are Fu Ren Liang Feng, written in 1237, for postpartum collapse and coma, called concurrent powder, or Jiao Jia San, instructed that the two herbs be powdered, then decocted with some wine added before administration. This combination is now frequently used for wind resulting from blood deficiency with such symptoms as tremors of the hands and feet or itching of the skin. So another combination is with Sephora floss or Huai Hua. That's Huai, Hua meaning flower, Hua. And Sephora floss Huai Hua is bitter and slightly cold, with a specific function of cooling the blood and stopping bleeding, particularly in the bowels. When the two herbs are used together, the hemostatic or blood stopping action of charred Schizonepeta Herba Jing Jie is led into the intestines by Sephora floss Huai Hua, where it supplements the hemostatic action of Sephora floss Huai Hua. While this pair of herbs is strong enough to be used as a two-herb formula for rectal bleeding from intestinal wind or hemorrhoids, the effects are even better if combined with Aranti fructus jurica and Platycati cacumen or Sibaya. This is the formula Sephora flower powder or Huai Hua San. If one's primary purpose is to cool the heat in the blood to treat the root, use unprepared Sephora floss immaturis or Huai Mi. On the other hand, if the focus is on quickly stopping the bleeding to address the branch, use the charred form. And finally, our third combination is with Fazioli semen or Chirxiao Do. An ancient adage says that all painful itchy sores pertain to the heart. Fazioli semen or Chirxiao Do enters the heart, cooling and clearing heat toxin, promoting blood flow, and treating sores. Effective medical formulas arranged by category observes that Faziola semen Chirxiao Do treats all abscesses, sores, and reddened swellings, regardless of the severity. Just mix with water and apply topically. All are cured. Schizonepeta spica Jing Jie Sui is light and raising in nature. It clears wind from the blood and treats itchy skin. Together, these herbs complement to clear heat and promote the flow of blood, resolve toxicity, expel wind, reduce rashes, and alleviate itching. The combination is often used in the treatment of itchy wind rash and swollen toxic sores. It can be decocted and taken internally or powdered, mixed with egg white, and applied externally. Contents. So according to Bensky and his team, the contents of this herb include triterpene saponin glycosides. I got it. And other glycosides and tannins, as well as riboflavin, thiamine, nicotinic acid. Those are all B vitamins, alpha globulins and beta globulins, fats and carbohydrates. Chen highlight essential oils and say about 0.43 to 2.05% are these essential oils and include menthone, pulegone, isomenthone, isopulegone, and limonene. And then also has schizomodiol and schizonepetae A through E. That's always my tongue twister category of discussion on the contents. We'll talk about its contents in just a few minutes and what they do in just a few more minutes. When we talk about the science here, let's get into the science. So according to Chen, the pharmacological effects of Jing Jie include the following actions: antipyretic, which means it lowers fevers, and diaphoretic means it induces sweating in rabbits. Antibiotic and analgesic, so it helps pain in vitro, so not in animals. Hemostatic, so stops bleeding in mice and rabbits. And the volatile oils can cause bronchodilation, treating wheezing and dyspnea. One review study, this is Zhao and Zhou, discuss various actions and the constituents causing them. So it's antipyretic from nepeta-lactone, a terpenoid compound. It's antioxidant from phenolics, flavonoids, and anthocyanin. It's anti-inflammatory, ab irritation, in other words, it's against irritation, and anti-tumor from volatile oils. It is also hemostatic, immunomodulatory, and antiviral, and antibacterial from alpha terpenine, terpenol formate, and P-cymenin, C-Y-M-E-N-I-N, cymenin, volatile oils. So antibacterial from various volatile oils as well, specific volatile oils. That was a good study that did an overview on that, so that's why I want to make sure I got it in here. Let's talk about drug-herb interactions. In general, literature search did not find any potential drug-herb interactions with this herb, and I did it a lot. I really tried to find it. But having said that, there was one study that showed that one constituent of this herb, the volatile oil schizonepetae, may affect cytochrome P453A1 and 2/2, 1A2, 2E1, and 2D6. So when this occurs, when I see, and there's lots of studies for this, and generally I don't include them as cautionary tales because it's one constituent out of hundreds. Now, schizonepetae, just by the name, because this is Schizonepetae, is the herb. When you see a constituent that has most of the herb's name in it, it usually means that constituent was first discovered and is primarily in this herb, so it's particularly special. So this volatile oil schizonepetae is probably pretty specific to this herb for the most part, which means it's probably a fairly important constituent of this. But it's still only one constituent. And who knows when all the other constituents are combined, if it's going to mitigate some of these effects. So usually when I see a single constituent causing an aspect of drug-herb interactions, I don't discuss it. I don't include it as an issue because I don't think it is an issue, though others do. So I want to put that out here. So that's what's happening here. This was a single component and was based on an in vitro and rat study. So that's another aspect. Generally, when I'm looking for drug-herb interactions, I want to see them in humans because all the studies in the world in rats and mice and animals and in vitro and in test tubes doesn't mean anything if it doesn't have the same effects in humans, and it often doesn't. So until it's in humans, it really isn't an interaction that I'm worried about. Therefore, this is not strong evidence of interactions, especially since they were contradictory. Some showed induction in mice and inhibition in vitro, so it was a little bit of a different thing. So I don't think there's anything to be super concerned about here with the drug-herb interactions. And there's another source text that I really like and usually has a really good handle on Chinese herbs. And this is a relatively commonly used Chinese herb. It's not rarely used. It's maybe not commonly used either. Somewhere in the middle. But and that book is the American Herbal Products Association's Botanical Safety Handbook. And like I said, that usually has a good chunk of our Chinese herbs. Does not have an entry on this herb. And they give nice little categories of risk for drug-herb interactions as well as overall concerns. And since it doesn't have an entry on this herb, we don't know what that's saying, but I want to mention that it doesn't. That's usually an indication that it's not one of the most commonly used Chinese herbs. So I've used it, and so I don't think it's uncommonly used. It's just not as common as other Chinese herbs. So what are the concerns about this herb? So Bensky and his team note several concerns with Jing Jie. Under the heading of cautions and contraindications, they say contraindicated where there is deficiency of the exterior, fully erupted measles or open sores, or an absence of pathogenic wind of any kind. So you need some wind in order to use this herb. Under the heading of toxicity, they say allergic reactions affecting the skin and digestive system have been reported. So be cautious about allergies here. Chen and Chen have several cautions and contraindications. Jing Jie is not recommended if perspiration is not due to wind, such as in patients with Wei defensive qi deficiency or yin deficient heat. And is contraindicated for patients experiencing spasms because of liver wind. So if liver wind are causing spasms, don't use this herb. They also say Jing Jie is contraindicated in cases of fully erupted measles or open sores. And while taking Jing Jie, patients should avoid foods such as fish, crab, goose, or duck, as consumption of these foods may increase itching of the skin. So that's interesting. So no fish, crab, goose, or duck. That's not one that I've heard of in the past, though often, traditionally there are food changes that happen with herbs. So that's good to know on this herb. And that's basically our herb for today. We started with our discussion of insulin and diabetes, and then we did a deep dive into a useful and interesting Chinese herb, Jing Jie, Schizonepetae Herba, or just Schizonepeta. This herb is relatively commonly used herb for treating colds, muscle spasms, rashes, and bleeding, and it seems relatively safe if a little on the mild side. We spent a good amount of time discussing its intricacies, including preparations, cautions, and comparisons to other herbs. And with that, we conclude another exploration of a very useful Chinese herb. Our next episode, in 2 weeks, we'll be looking at another herb of the world, Plantago ovata, or blonde psyllium. This is commonly used as a fiber supplement, but can it also help diabetes and cholesterol? We're going to find out. As always, we will do our deep dive into this herb and look at its traditional uses, its preparations, interactions, and cautions. And as usual, we will be adding something a little different. It's going to be another interesting trek into the exciting universe of herbs. Please join us. As always, thank you very much for listening. If you like this podcast, please do us a humongous favor. Subscribe in your favorite podcast app. That just does a world of good for us, and we thank you for even considering doing that. So thank you. And you can get this course, as well as many others, as CEUs and continuing education units, and National Certification Commission of Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine professional development activities at www.integrativemedicinecouncil.org. That's Integrative Medicine Council, COUNCIL.org. And you can use that coupon that we talked about at the beginning to get 20% off. That's SH for Spurbs Herbs, SH 20 off. And you get 20% off everything you want with that. And you can always get in touch with me at Dr. Greg at spurbsherbs.com or at our website, www.spurbsherbs.com. Thank you very much, and I really appreciate it. And as usual, we have extensive bibliography. Thank you.
Spurbs Herbs.
The proceeding was presented by Dr. Greg Sperber. We would like to thank Janelle for all her support and everybody else who contributed to this program.
Janelle.
Timothy
Nick
Dobbins,
Rogers.
Campbell.